Hey, I'm Mike.
And I'm Kevin.
And this is 6 Degrees of Schwarzenegger, the podcast where we take a long, hard look at some of your favorite action movies from the era of Arnold.
Schwarzenegger is the icon of the genre, and we're taking a deep dive into some of these 80s and 90s cult action movies and breaking them all the way down.
Let me tell you of the days of high adventure.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Kevin back in the saddle again with Mike.
Howdy ho.
For a brand new episode of 6 Degrees of Schwarzenegger. We're going to start on a brand new movie as well, and one that's near and dear to both of our hearts. We're talking about Arnold, the man himself, in Conan the Barbarian.
Love this film.
It's 1982. Arnold Schwarzenegger, John Milius.
Written by Oliver Stone.
Yeah.
It was basically, it's not the one that put Arnold on the map, but it was the first big movie role he starred in. You know, he'd done a couple, at this point, he was basically known for being a weightlifter. Like, he had won like Mr. Olympia several years in a row. But this is the movie where he was like, I'm going to be a legit actor now.
Right. Like, he had been famous before just for being Arnold Schwarzenegger, but this one, like, sort of showed the world that he's also a movie star.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, I was going to say maybe not so much his acting chops,
but he can hold. He's got charisma on.
Yeah,
screen.
We've talked about that before.
Yeah.
Like, Arnold can just say the silliest thing on film, and it's like, oh, that's so cool, you know. And I don't know if it's because of his accent or his kind of like
he's got a lot of charisma and personality. I think it comes through.
Yeah.
So I was like a tiny little 1-year-old when this movie came out, but this is one of the movies. It's almost my earliest memory as a human being is my dad sneaking me in to watch this movie on TV, like on TBS one morning. And he's like, don't tell your mom that I let you watch this.
And I wonder if you even got the full effect watching it on regular TV instead of...
Probably not. Yeah, I think it was still violent.
I saw it on HBO for the first time. So I saw the violence. I saw the blood and the gore and the sex scenes and the boobies and all that stuff like that. And I wonder if you got that full effect the first time you saw it on TBS.
I knew it was unlike any of the stuff I had watched in my life prior to that, because it was like, whoa, this is like people are getting smashed with axes and hammers and swords and whatever else. But before we get like to the nuts and bolts of the movie, we should talk a little bit about the men behind the movie, because this had some legendary dudes associated with the film.
Absolutely.
The cast was great. You had James Earl Jones, Darth Vader.
Yeah, so James Earl Jones, like, he had already been nominated for an Academy Award at this point. He had done, I think he had done A Great White Hope, or I think he was nominated for Best Actor in that film.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this movie is so funny to me because I would have always thought this was kind of like a throwaway B movie, that one of those movies they made in Italy for like really cheap, and they just were like, let's make a quick turn and make some money.
Yeah.
But no, this has got like legit actors.
Max von Sydow, who I feel like also probably was Oscar nominated.
Yeah, I'm sure he was. Legit actors. It had legit screenwriter. Oliver Stone was one of the screenwriters for this, and he had done Midnight Express, which was nominated for 4 Academy Awards and won 2. And then he did...
Right after this, he had Scarface.
Yeah, and he had Scarface directly after this movie. So... Yeah, I mean,
he was a big deal. He was hot. Milius was like a hot commodity at the time.
Can you picture like John Milius and Oliver Stone like in a room like drinking scotch and like smoking cigars while they're writing this film?
It's two macho, like man's man type of dudes, you know. Milius, he was like, he's sort of famous for being a gun lover. I think he had a role in the NRA. His movies tend to be a little right-wing type feel to them. You know, he had, his bio says he had tried to enlist in the Marines because during Vietnam he wanted to go to war, but he was rejected on medical grounds. But his films,
probably.
It seems like from his films, like he has a fascination with the military and warfare and stuff like that. Like some of his other films were, he wrote Dirty Harry, he wrote Magnum Force, he wrote and directed Red Dawn, he wrote Apocalypse Now.
Yeah, I remember looking at the notes and thinking, I was like, this dude did Red Dawn. Like, I remember that movie.
Yeah,
like,
that was like, and it's very much like a
was.
Reagan, like America's the best type movie. He wrote the USS
Anti-commie, Down with the Red.
Yeah, he wrote the USS Indianapolis speech from Jaws, the one Quint gives about the ship being sunk and the sharks coming and eating all the sailors.
I feel like the 70s and 80s had a lot of guys that had seen war in person and came back and like wrote all these great screenplays because of all their adventures and everything they had seen.
He's less successful as a director than he was as a writer. Apparently he's friends with the Coen brothers, and that the character Walter from Big Lebowski is based on John Milius.
Okay.
Which his look, now that when I read that, I was like, well, he looks just like John Milius. Walter, played by John Goodman, and Lebowski looks just like John Milius.
Yeah, I can see that.
But he's also very much like, making Nam references and stuff like that.
And just like very over the top and very... Yeah.
And Milius had a stroke in 2010 that pretty much incapacitated him for a while. He's apparently recovered and is still alive, but he doesn't really work much anymore.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, like you said, Oliver Stone had written some great movies, and then he went on to be even maybe more renowned as a director, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like Wall Street, Platoon. Yeah, he's done a lot of Salvador.
He had like
that.
Born on the 4th of July and JFK.
Yeah, he's definitely
he was
known for his
hot,
movies.
like late 80s, early 90s. He was as successful as there was. He also was a dude who dropped out of college and enlisted in the army to go fight in Vietnam.
Now, did he drop out of Yale? I know he went to Yale, but he dropped out of Yale. So he was that guy.
Enlist in the army.
So in Platoon, he was basically that character.
Yeah, it was autobiographical.
He dropped out of, or he didn't want to go to college and was like, I'm going to go to Nam.
This would be another, and the thing about Oliver Stone is I feel like he's kind of left wing. Like this would make for an interesting podcast by itself. You know, you had Milius, who wanted to go to war but never got to combat. And then you had Stone, who wanted to go to war and got to combat and was wounded, has like Purple Hearts and stuff like that. And the guy who never actually saw combat is like a right-wing kind of war hawk guy. And the guy who did see combat is like, peace.
And I'm pretty sure it's because he saw combat.
Yeah.
Like, and
that's interesting.
I don't know if we're getting too far off the subject.
Well, let's get back on the subject.
Okay, yeah.
And then you had Dino like helming up the whole thing, Dino De Laurentiis, who was like legendary Italian producer.
Yeah, over like 500 movies to his credit.
It's insane.
5,000, like hundreds of Academy Award
now, most of his movies are like kind of pulpy, exploitation type flicks.
I mean, he's got to pay the rent, you know.
He didn't have too many like award type like movies that were gunning for awards, but he had stuff like Raw Deal, Maximum Overdrive, Flash Gordon, as we mentioned.
Yeah.
Orca, which is like a terrible Jaws knockoff.
Yeah, the killer whale, I remember that.
He did the 1976 King Kong. He did Barbarella. Like he does all types of whatever. He likes to make a buck.
Exactly,
you know?
which is exactly why I would have just thought this was a throwaway B movie that they filmed, like, because it was like a Dino De Laurentiis produced, and one of those Italian producers.
Yeah,
but this is like a legit film.
I mean,
funny enough,
and Arnold had not really done any sort of big budget type movie at this point. Like, this was a project that was put together specially for him, which makes it more interesting to me that they obviously spent like a lot of money doing this on a star that wasn't really like a bankable guy at that point in his career yet.
So this movie was made for Arnold? Like, this was a project for him?
They had been developing it for years. Like, I read a thing that said that Arnold's long hair in the movie is his real hair and that he had been growing it out since 1979 for Conan. Mm-hmm. So it had been, 2 or 3 years in the making.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think it kept going through different directors, different writers until they finally figured out what to do. But now I guess we can move on to the actual film itself here. So the film opens with this quote from Nietzsche, that which does not kill us makes us stronger.
Yeah.
Which I feel like is a little strange just because it's anachronistic. Like, you're taking a movie that's supposed to be set in like some sort of prehistoric time, and then you're putting like a more 20th century quote to lead it off. I just felt like that's a little strange. Like if you had a Christopher Columbus movie with a with a modern quote
with an Eminem lyric in there or something.
Exactly.
No, I see what you're saying, but I think that can a quote transcend time? Like, can it go forwards and backwards?
I would say it's the thing that, obviously that thought that which does not kill us makes us stronger is like a theme in the movie.
It's the central theme.
It's like an inspiration.
Yeah, and so like they start the movie off with this quote, and then the very first thing you see is them creating a sword. You know, like the Conan's father is hammering out this sword, and he holds it up in the air and it's like glowing red hot. So he had just forged it.
It's a really cool opening credit sequence.
And I think he starts hammering away at it, and then he plunges it into the ground to cool it off. And that's the whole thing. Is like they're comparing Conan the character to steel, and they're saying that, you know, we're gonna beat you, we're gonna hammer you, we're gonna toughen you up, and then at the very end you're going to be just as strong as steel. Yeah,
and that seems to be like the overarching, like for Milius, like that was what it was all about. Like steel is strong, you know, steel is true. It also had that Mako voiceover at the beginning where he's giving like some background on the era, the time, and it's like it's all pretty much unimportant. He's like after Atlantis and all this stuff. But what's weird is that it's Mako, a character from the movie's voice, talking to us as if it's the present, like many, many years ago, all this stuff happened, you know, centuries ago. But
back in time, this story happened.
Yeah, so is Mako ageless? Like he's referring, because he's in the story centuries ago as well, and he's referring to it as centuries ago.
I don't think he's ageless. I think he's just telling the story like after it happened. Like, because, you know, skipping way ahead, at the very end of the movie, you have that one scene where they go into the future and Conan's like this king.
Yeah, so he's jumping around in time.
Yeah, so I think it's totally fine that Mako does the narration in the present of wherever he's talking, because he's just telling a story. I mean, it happens all the time. He's just telling a story. Now, one of the interesting things I think about him doing the narration is originally Arnold Schwarzenegger was supposed to do the narration, and they thought that his accent was so thick and so heavy that they were like, they just scrapped that idea and just had Mako do the narration.
I could see that, because when you're asking Arnold to act with just his voice, like you can't even see him and his body language and all that stuff, then I think his acting is really shaky.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's asking a lot for a newcomer to not only act in this film, but to also narrate the whole plot.
I mean, you know, this guy Arnold is not a trained actor. Yeah. You know, he was just a guy who got in, had the door swung open for him because he was a celebrity.
But that's the thing I like about Arnold Schwarzenegger the most, is he's not a trained actor, but he's like, you know what, you put me in this scene, I'm just going to muscle my way through it. Like, and it's going to come out great, and it's going to work. I've always appreciated about him.
So we got this father-son moment where it's a young Conan talking with his dad, who is maybe like the chief or something like that of their community or village or whatever,
or the stone, the steel master. Or something. Yeah,
he's saying, you know, steel is strong, like steel you can trust, or trust only steel. Mm-hmm. That seems to be kind of the philosophy of the movie, right? As we said, or that's like their religion, perhaps, like the worshiping Crom.
Yeah, because he introduces Crom as their god, which is a fictional god. I didn't see it in anywhere.
Yeah, it seems
But I thought, this is, you have to remember, like, this is like not prehistoric. They're not cavemen, you know.
They're like pagans.
This is like medieval times, I suppose. And these are like barbarians.
It's not far after cavemen, probably as soon as they started working with metal, like, you know.
Give or take 1,000 something years. But the whole point is, like, you can't trust your next door neighbor. You can't trust, you know, your wife. You can't trust your friend. You can't trust this animal, you know. You have to trust this steel, like, because it's the only thing that's going to get your back, you know.
It's like trust the sword in your hand.
Exactly, because it's the only true thing.
It's kind of bleak, you know.
I'm sure they lived in a bleak world, like, as the next scene shows.
Also, just technically, the green screen on this scene is really bad. That must have been like the early days of green screen. There's like a stormy sort of sky behind them, but it's just a bad special effect. They might have added that scene later.
You know, it doesn't pop out to me, only because I think the scene looks so cool, because they're basically sitting on top of a mountain.
It's kind of stylized.
Yeah, they're sitting on a mountaintop.
We give it a pass.
And his fat father is telling him a story. His father is played by William Stone, and for all you Clint Eastwood fans out there, William Stone is in Any Which Way But Loose, I believe, the second Any Which Way movie.
Okay,
and he plays like the I guess the bad guy in that film. He's the one that Clint Eastwood gets into like a fight with. He also plays a commander in Red Dawn. So,
okay, one of the bad guys?
Yeah, one of the bad guys. So this guy was like...
He was known to be a bodybuilder
He was a bodybuilder. There's a lot of bodybuilders for obvious reasons in this film. But William Smith, man, this dude's like spoke 7 different dialects of Russian or something.
I feel like
that.
On the commentary he said 17.
Or something crazy like
it's
that.
It's like, which those languages are probably similar.
This dude was like a CIA Russian operative or something.
Yeah, this guy's like the real deal. I'm not familiar with him really, other than from this.
I just know him from Any Which Way But Loose. Or it's either Any Which Way But Loose or Any Which Way You Can, and also from Red Dawn. Those are the 2 movies that I know him from. He did a lot of early TV, like a lot of westerns and stuff like that.
Now, we go from that scene to James Earl Jones and his band of bad guys like raiding Conan's village, and they basically kill everybody.
Oh yeah.
It's very good cinematography when they're riding up like these hazy forest, like shafts of light coming through the trees and stuff like that. Great music.
Yeah. If you want to talk a little bit about Thulsa Doom, they mentioned in a commentary that and I thought this was really interesting because it always stuck out to me, but I never like kind of put one and one together. But they basically wanted to make Thulsa Doom look kind of not androgynous, but I forget what he said. Anthropomorphic
like a race that had vanished from the earth.
Yeah, so
because he has like long straight hair and blue eyes.
As a black male, he has long straight hair and he has blue eyes. So he has like white features on a black male.
He did look like a different species,
something you never really, not a person you've really seen before. So it kind of stuck out like. And I could kind of see where that would fit into this world. You know,
all his boys are kind of rocking the same haircut.
Oh yeah,
it's him, like short bangs and long straight hair.
They look like a heavy metal band, like early '80s, like Thulsa Dooms, and I'm sure I wouldn't be surprised if there was like a heavy metal band called Thulsa Doom.
That's a good band name.
Yeah.
And his main 2 dudes were Ben Davidson, who's like a 6'8" former NFL player, like just a big, massive dude, and then he had his boy Arnold's guy. Sven Ole Thorsen.
I wonder if this is the first time they met, or
I think they knew each other from the bodybuilding circuit.
Yeah, I can see that.
I think he's like, I got some guys for you.
Gotcha.
One of the dude who runs up when they're about to raid the town and who perches on top of a rock for a minute. That's like this little Italian bodybuilder who was in Pumping Iron.
Franco Colombo.
Yeah. He's like, he was Arnold's best friend. Or something like that.
A lot of bodybuilding. It's hard to believe that. I don't know if Arnold had that much pull to get his boys into the movie, or they just really needed a bunch of big hulking type characters to play barbarians, which I can see both.
It seems like everybody loves Arnold.
Yeah.
Him and Milius are still buddies. I saw a thing where him and James Earl Jones became good friends. Like, I feel like Arnold's just a guy that when you meet him, you fall in love with him.
Well, listening to the commentary, he makes like this really offhanded joke about Richard Simmons. And it's like, man, that was endearing, you know? It's like,
he took something horrible.
Yeah.
We're not going to repeat.
And he laughs about it. And I found myself laughing about it too. And I was like, oh, it's just like Arnold. That's why, you know, he got away with sleeping with his maid. And he's like the governor of California. Like, just Arnold, you know?
So in this battle sequence, you got, Conan's dad gets like an axe in the back, and then these dogs come in and just like tear him apart.
Yeah, that's a bad way.
That's crazy, man. That was some violence in this scene.
Harsh, man.
And then they're sort of passing Conan's dad's sword around amongst them, like examining the fine craftsmanship or whatever, which I feel like is very relevant, even though they never make a mention of like that the sword is part of Conan's quest or whatever. I just feel like it's part of his motivation because you keep seeing it over and over again throughout the film.
And I was about to say, I don't remember if we see him with I don't remember if Conan gets the sword later on in the film. I feel like they set it up like they do. Yeah. I wanted to give a quick piece of trivia about Ben Davidson. Did you know he was in Behind the Green Door?
Nah.
He played a doorman in that. Do you know what that movie is?
Is it one of the like original porn?
Yeah, it's like one of those early 70s, like, you know, when porn was cool, like cheap porn or whatever. So he played a doorman in Behind the Door, which I saw that in the notes last night. I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. Because, you know, now if you did that now, that would ruin your career.
It's like him and what's our guy, the Native American actor, Sonny Landham.
Sonny Landham.
You guys from porn to like
Sylvester Stallone
action. Stallone did?
Stallone did a porn? Oh, yeah.
What movie?
It was called, they renamed it The Italian Stallion, but he did like it wasn't like a porn. It was like a softcore porn.
Okay.
It was like what's that, Red Shoe Diaries or something like that.
Okay.
But I think he has a complete nude scene in that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. so they Thulsa Doom, James Earl Jones, he's like sort of hypnotizes Conan's mom with his eyes almost. Like they just have this long scene where they're staring back and forth at each other. And then he turns his back on her and then he swings around and like chops her head off with Conan's father's sword. And that's a very cinematic moment when the head comes falling down. It's like a low shot, so you don't see the violence. You just see like a hair and a head drop down and the body falls away, and it's just like young Conan's shocked face.
Yeah.
That always was a powerful moment for me when I was little.
So I think this, from a technical standpoint, this scene is really similar to Jaws. You know, you mentioned Jaws earlier. Mm-hmm. So in Jaws, they totally planned on showing the shark a lot more than they did, but the shark just didn't work.
Right.
So in this one scene, they were supposed to show Thulsa Doom chopping off her head, but they said that they made a bunch of like plastic dummy heads and stuff, and it just didn't look right, and it just didn't look real.
Wow.
So they decided to just cut her head off screen. And it's a much more impactful scene when they don't show it.
For me, when I think of this movie, like that's the shot that I think of for this movie, because it's like burned into my brain. It was such a well framed shot, and like everything about it was perfect. It's like a much more powerful moment to not see the violence, I think. Yeah,
and the kid really sells it. His name is Jorge Sanz, I believe, and he's actually still acting today. Now he does a lot of Spanish films and everything, but yeah, he really sells that moment, like the despair in his face and how scared he looks.
I think basically every actor in this movie who doesn't have speaking lines is Spanish, just because they filmed in Spain.
Yeah.
And they're not gonna like bring in people who to not even speak, you know what I mean?
So Conan's mother she's like a Madonna, like her name is like Naduska or something like that.
One name person?
Yeah, like a one name, like Cher.
Was she a model or something?
She was a model. I
can see that. She's lovely.
She's gorgeous. Like, you know, born in Germany, probably moved to Spain just to kind of like drink wine all day and stuff like that. Became a model, and then they ended up filming it, put her in this movie.
So we got young Conan here who's sort of in shock, but he's like really like noticing the shit out of their symbol, Thulsa Doom and his group, which is like these two snakes sort of looking at each other, like and they're sort of connected at the tail, I guess. But we know just from how much attention he's paying to it that it must be something that's going to be relevant.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I didn't even notice that they were snakes at first. I didn't even put that together until later on.
Okay.
Like I didn't like that one scene. I was like, I didn't think they were snakes until after I found out what happens with the character.
So they take him and some other children from the village, and they sort of enslave them, and they're marching them off like, you know, in a line, all shackled up or whatever. To me, there's no reason to leave these kids alive. Like after you kill, like you're asking for people to come along later wanting revenge, right?
Yeah, like what was it in Godfather 2 where he wants to kill young Vito Corleone. Yeah. He has a legit
why
reason.
Not? Yeah.
Like he's like, you might come back and get me.
When he grows up, he's going to grow up strong. Yeah.
So yeah, why would you? But
I think that's their source of income. For one, is like selling slaves.
Yeah. So I understand what you're saying. You would pillage a village. I mean, these kids are so young, though. Like you could kill the village. I'm sure this happened before. You kill all the mothers and the fathers in the village, and then you take all the kids, and then you inundate them into your society, and they have nobody else, so they're totally afraid, and then they grow up being like the chief of that new society. You know, I'm sure it happens all the time, but we know what happens with them.
I'll just say if you're ever pillaging a village, that's a risky move.
Kill the kids
to leave them alive.
no to any
as long as you're killing 100 people.
Okay.
I would leave no survivors to come later for revenge. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, but humans are a resource, so you can make money off of them. So what would be the whole reason of pillaging a community if you're not going to use the resources?
I feel
there?
like at some point, this is jumping later into the movie, but I feel like he says he was just gathering steel, like weapons and whatnot from the villagers who are extra good at making weapons or something. But you know, it's just, I guess that's their source of income, is raiding what resources they can.
And this wasn't like they were raiding like some large city. Like they were just raiding like a outpost, like peaceful group of people. Like there was really no reason to even raid them whatsoever. Like they could have traded with them, but they were just showing their power and their might. Like they were just a deranged like sect of the religion.
They're like a cult or whatever that's on the rise.
Mm-hmm. After they don't kill all the kids, which it's going to come back and haunt them, folks.
Yeah.
They take them to the Wheel of Pain, which is this giant, like basically a grain mill out in the middle of like the desert somewhere. I didn't see this, and I wish I had looked it up, but did you know if they really built that as a set?
Yeah.
Or was that, they really built that?
I was watching the documentary that's on the DVD, and they had the guy who built the wheel said that it was so well balanced and so well built that it was really easy to push.
Oh, really?
Like, so that they had to off camera have like crew members pushing against Arnold to make it look like he was straining to push it. Yeah, because it was so well balanced that you could just shove it and it would sort of spin.
So I wonder if they, you know how sometimes they make a movie, they build a set and then they just leave the set there for the people.
That'd be
to
awesome
use
if
it.
They did.
So if that's still there and like today it's like a giant mill grain that they're making all this like bread and stuff from. But yeah, so they take the kids to this mill grain and they shackle young Conan to the wheel and they start pushing it. Okay, so this is kind of like now a montage of the seasons as Conan grows. Like he starts off at, I don't know, how old was that kid? Like 12? What do you think?
I would say he was maybe 10.
Yeah, so he's a young kid, right?
Young kid, yeah.
And he grows into Conan. Now, it's weird to me that they never have anybody else push that wheel with them because
they're not adding new people.
They're not adding people. Like when somebody dies off, they just add it because they seem like they've been raiding a lot of villages at this time. So they've probably got a surplus of people they could just plant onto the wheel.
You would think so.
Or even people that were in their own religion that were being punished and they would just like throw them to the wheel. But for whatever reason, they do like this montage of all the seasons and then it turns and they do like this is a great introduction to a character where they have that shot, that like mid shot of Conan, of Arnold Schwarzenegger, like raising up his head to see him as an adult.
It seems like he's probably like a 10-year-old and then he's maybe like a 16 or 17-year-old and then he's an adult. And
you say that hair is real? I thought that was a wig.
They said it looks really bad, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's like if that's his hair, is a bad
I feel like later in the movie his hair is shorter and I wonder if they meant that when his hair was long but not that long that was real. Yeah. I don't know, but I assumed it was a wig because it looked so bad. Yeah, but then they were talking about him growing it out for years in preparation for this role. Yeah, I don't know.
But the thing is, like, what they show is that this guy's been pushing this wheel for like years, right? And so he's now this massive like bodybuilder. Like that's all. Like I was thinking, like, did he never do anything else? Like he obviously had to have downtime.
They probably just fed him food and just like go push the wheel. And chicken and
so they fed him good then.
You got to have the protein, man.
Yeah.
But it's like, to me, in the whole movie, this is the most effective bit of filmmaking is the way they crafted this montage. Just because that's such a great montage. Yeah. Like it's snowing and then it's summertime again and whatever. And he's getting older and all the others are disappearing, like dropping dead or whatever it is. They even he's only the strong survive, he's the best of the best.
And if I'm not mistaken, they even show where he's walking, that the groove where he's walking gets deeper. Yeah. So it's like cool. he's been there for a long time.
How many miles do you think you walked on that thing?
Oh man, I can't even do the math on that. Like like we're talking like, obviously he started off as a little kid, right? And then when they showed him, he was an adult. But that's we're talking like 20 years.
20 years, right?
We're talking like Jesus type.
At least 15.
Oh, yeah, like a long time. Like, I don't know how Arnold was when he was early in Arnold's career, so he's probably, I don't know, like late 20s when he filmed this. Yeah, he could have
been 30 maybe.
Yeah. So he went from being like a 13-year-old. Literally, this is like a Jesus story. Like he went from being like a little kid, and then he disappears for a long time, and then he comes back as Jesus Conan.
I do feel like we're supposed to believe Conan's like early 20s at this time, even though Arnold was older. But, still, you're right. It's been at least 10 to 15 years. Oh, yeah. He's pushing this thing.
That's a long time that he pushed it.
So Arnold said on the making of that it was super cold when they were filming this, because you see him pushing in the snow and everything else. And he's wearing basically a loincloth. So they were just feeding him a steady diet of like tea with schnapps mixed in. And I just love the thought of Arnold, like drunk Arnold pushing this wheel.
Yeah. Yeah, I can totally see that.
So then we got this dude with the big red hair, big red beard comes and sort of takes him off the wheel.
Mm-hmm. Who looks just like his dad, like if you're not
a redhead version.
Yeah, if you're not looking real, if you're kind of just glancing at the movie, you would think that was his father. And I don't know if they did that. I don't know if they did that on purpose, like they wanted to have his new master be like a father figure to him, or they just like hired a guy that just so happens to look like William Smith.
So the dude also, I thought, looked like the main wildling from Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
You know, like the redhead.
Tormund.
Tormund, yeah.
Yeah, early Tormund. Maybe that's Tormund's dad in real life. You know, and all those European actors, you never know.
So when he rolls up on him, like the redheaded dude and the dude who's like supervising the wheel, they do the weirdest like handshake where they like just sort of softly press their palms together.
Yeah,
it was just odd.
I don't remember that, but I mean, it is like those times. So, like, I'm sure you have clans that you have to have special handshakes with.
So then they take Conan, and they basically, he doesn't really know what's going on, and they just put him next to like a pit and tell him to wait. And then they bring in this other dude, like
Will Chamberlain. Like, doesn't he look like Wilt Chamberlain?
A little bit, but he wasn't that tall.
I know, but it's like, did they give Wilt a scene in this
Destroyer,
movie?
right?
That's what I'm saying. Like, did they give Wilt a scene in this movie and we just didn't know it? And then they like, oh, Wilt, you were so good in the first movie, let's just put you in the second and expand your character.
This dude had like, his teeth were filed into like sharp, fangs or whatever. It was pretty gross, and I don't think Conan really knew what was going on.
No.
But they basically just throw him in there, and the dude jumps on him, and it's a fight to the death.
So this is kind of one of those like nature versus nurture things. Like, if you put somebody out in the wild, will they survive on their own without being taught? So this is what they were. They were just like,
oh yeah,
they were like, look, we're just gonna throw you in a pit, and you have to figure it out. Like, I don't know if that guy. So they don't really talk about it, but I don't know if that guy paid good money for Conan when he, like, was he like a bargain basement slave? Because he'd been pushing that wheel for like 13, 14 years, right?
So a thing I noticed, this is like proof that you notice something new every single time you watch. A thing I noticed this time was the whole time when he's a gladiator, he's fighting like underneath the sigil of like the wheel. Oh. They have like a wheel up on a post that they carry around with him, and he's got this wheel of pain medallion on. So I think maybe it was like less of a slave situation than it was of like this is how we train our guy, and when we get the strongest guy left, then we take him and make him a fighter.
Yeah, and I never got the sense that it was. I thought it was, like you said first, like it was just to grind their grain or whatever. I never got the sense that they were training him to be some gladiator. Fact that
he's like fighting underneath that sigil of a wheel, like makes me think that maybe that's like their clan, like they. But at any rate.
I mean, that's some like Ralph Macchio, Pat Morita, like wax on, wax off type of training.
That'd be brutal training.
Yeah, like that's a weird way to like train somebody. I mean, it's just basically strength training because you're not training him on the all that stuff came later, See,
I think then they throw him into a fight, and if he survives the fight, then they'll train him up some more to be a fighter.
But wouldn't it have been cool, like, to see a scene where Conan is like, oh, so he was a kid when he got on the wheel. Let's say we see a scene like 5 years later, and they're like having lunch or dinner or something like that, and Conan gets into a fight with another kid because he stole his food, or like that would be, and then they're like, oh, okay, that's the guy we need to keep an eye on right there.
I don't think they got a whole lot of breaks from the wheel. They probably fed him while they were pushing. Oh, you had to sleep though.
Yeah, you had to sleep. There's no way they were pushing that wheel 24/7.
But so Conan does get beat up by this dude for a little bit, but then he gets his feet under him and he takes the guy out with just brute strength.
And he doesn't kill him though, right? He just knocks him out basically.
I think he broke his neck.
Oh yeah,
because he twisted his neck.
Is that what he punched him and it punched up or something like that?
I think so, yeah. And this was probably in his career, like the first time we got to hear that trademark, like Arnold grunting and screaming. He's like, it's just funny. It makes me laugh every time. But yeah, Conan's kind of a natural at fighting. Like we get a montage where he's getting more and more like weapons, and he's fighting bigger and badder looking dudes, but he's taking them all out.
But still, no training. Well, not really. Like the first part of the montage is just him fighting, right? They're giving him weapons. Right. They're giving him bigger and better weapons, right? But once they see that he's becoming like this skilled natural killer, then that's when they start training him.
They take him to like the sword master, right? And they're like, this dude's teaching him how to fight and wield a sword and all like that. It's the montage is good. This movie is, if nothing else, is good with its montages.
Oh yeah.
But
I need a montage. Where's that song? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, show it all would take too long.
I need a montage, or I want a montage.
So now is when it gets a little weird, because they're like also teaching Conan like culture. They got him like teaching him to read and write and stuff like this, but they also keep him in a cage and they're like bringing women to him.
Yeah.
And they got that voiceover from Mako like saying he was bred to the finest stock.
Yeah.
And this is just a weird, uncomfortable kind of scene, right?
No, and I'll
okay.
tell you why I say that, because I don't think it's weird in the context of the movie. Like, to me, it makes perfect sense in the movie,
in
like,
the world that
they live in. Yeah. But I don't understand. Like, he's definitely like a slave, right? Am I wrong in saying that?
It seems like that, but I feel like
he's treated better.
Giving these women like seems like a reward for him.
Or is it a reward? Or are they literally breeding him like they would like a horse?
I guess,
you know,
like
a
little bit of both, probably.
Yeah, and are they like saying that we're going to breed him to the best stock, and then if he does produce a child, then we'll take that child and make that child into the greatest warrior ever? I mean, they don't expand on that part. Like, I guess you're right. Maybe that was a reward for him.
I mean, he probably enjoyed it, but
I'm sure
this woman,
did.
though, was clearly scared when they brought her in, so that makes it just sort of like awkward to watch.
I'm sure she was like some village that had been captured, and one of the girls from
like
the village, and they
the
just
best looking or the most athletic or whatever it is.
Yeah. So basically, he raped this chick, right?
Well, so it was kind of weird because he takes the blanket and he wraps a blanket around her like it's okay, but then like 5 seconds later he's taking the blanket back off her and laying her down. So
she looks petrified the entire time. Like,
I get the feeling Conan like felt protective over her, but at the same time that doesn't make it any like cooler for her, you know?
Yeah, and is it weird that all those, because so in the particular scene, it comes off as if that's the first time they've done that, right? Like,
I think so.
Because if it had been like the fifth time, he would have been like, "Oh, get in here!
I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, let's do this." So, isn't it weird that they're watching him?
Yeah, there's like a crowd of dudes watching.
Like, if it's a reward? If it's like literally a reward for him, then why would they watch? Like, to me,
they didn't have TV back then, so it's like entertainment for the guys.
They did have the Warrior Games, though.
Yeah.
So, like, to me, if it was an actual reward, then they would have just dropped off this girl and let him be, right?
Yeah.
But I personally think that
they want to make sure that he does the deed, maybe, because I assume that whoever owns the woman is like paying for this.
Man, yeah, I think it was probably both. I think it was part
like when you're
breeding.
breeding a racehorse, it's like you're paying a stud fee or whatever. Something like that.
What? Yeah, I was about to say something really weird.
Let's not do it.
Yeah, you know how they breed horses and they have to.
But so now they got Conan. He's like sitting up on top of a table, and everyone's sort of crowded around him. And that's when they're like going over their philosophy or whatever. And that he asks him, "What is best in life?" And Conan, like these other guys are saying, I guess, the wrong answer. And they're like, "Conan, what is best in life?" And he says, "To crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of the women."
Now, this is without a doubt the most famous line from this whole movie.
Yeah, and that's hardcore, dude.
Yeah. Like, whenever I think of this, whenever anybody normally thinks of this movie, this is the first thing that pops in their head. To me, that's what I first think of, right?
And this was Arnold's first line of dialogue in the whole movie.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
that's crazy. We're like 30 minutes in, maybe something like that.
Mm-hmm. I think maybe that's because Arnold couldn't speak good English. Like, I mean, not Arnold, but Arnold couldn't speak. Yeah. So they were. I wonder how many takes they did of that actual line.
If you look at the whole movie, he probably doesn't say. He probably has one of the fewest amounts of lines of any of the main actors in it.
I think Arnold early in his career was really famous for like saying like 10 words and getting paid like $10 million.
He barely talked in Terminator.
Yeah, like he said like 5 or 6 things in Terminator and probably got paid like $3 million for that movie or however much, I don't know.
So now that red-bearded, red-haired dude who took him off the wheel one night, he just sort of sets him free.
So now, I don't know if he sets him free or if he just got shit-faced and was like, I love you so much. You're the greatest thing in the world. You're free. And then he woke up the next morning and was like, what did I do?
I could see him feeling like he'd grown attached to Conan and would hate to see him die.
And that goes back into the whole father figure, like him looking a lot like his dad, you know?
But what's weird is that Conan seems like he doesn't want to go. It's like, in like a White Fang or something where you're trying to turn the wild animal loose
like a trained dog,
and he doesn't want to go.
Yeah, like that's all he's ever known. His whole life is not his whole life, but all he's known for. How long do you think he was with that guy? Like, he obviously was.
To me, a couple years.
But he wasn't with him as long as he was on the wheel, right?
No.
So, and he never at any point was like trying to escape any of that stuff, right? Like he was never trying to escape the wheel. He was never trying to escape his. So this is the life he knew. So why would he want to leave?
You know what? And I mentioned earlier the wheel medallion that he's wearing. Like he wears that medallion almost for the whole rest of the movie. So I think that he thought fondly of those people in that time. The fact that he set him loose in the middle of the night makes me think that the rest of the gang wasn't in on it.
Oh, he was drunk.
He was either letting him go on his own like a loose cannon, or like you say, he regretted it.
No, I'm telling you, he was drunk, and he was like, ah.
So then we got like Conan running in the wilderness being chased by dogs. Mm-hmm. So do you think they sent the dogs to try to track him down?
No, I think that was.
It was like wild dogs.
I think that was just wild dogs
or whatever.
Yeah, I think that was another one of those signs of like nature versus nurture. Like, they threw him in a pit and he had to just acclimate to the pit, right? So this is him being thrown into nature and he just had to acclimate to nature. I don't think they were seeking him, because they would have had a scene, I think, where they would have had like a couple of guys chasing him.
Let him loose, if they were doing that. So a little behind the scenes, like these dogs that they were using in the movie were not well trained. Like they said they attacked the handler on the set, and also they said that Arnold got like he was a little too slow climbing up on the rocks on one take, and they bit him, and they had on some footage that was removed from the thing, like you can see him jump and kind of grab him by the butt or on his leg or something like that. And you hear Arnold, he's like, God damn it. It's funny, man.
I love those like early, like 80s, those 70s, 80s.
It's like guerrilla
movies.
Style. Plus this was a macho movie where they're like, oh, come on, Arnold, you can do this stunt yourself, Like they were all doing their own stunts and everything like this. He had to get stitches for that.
Yeah, I'm saying like this is his first movie. They were like, suck it up.
Do it yourself, buddy. Yeah. So then these wolves have him cornered, and then he takes shelter down in this cave. Right. And that actually will take us to the end of this episode. So we'll be back next time with a whole lot more about this wonderful movie, Conan the Barbarian.
All right. See you later.